Good afternoon. Welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you have joined me today. It's a very cold, January, wintry day. The fog is heavy, and I think we're going to go to Russia today. It seems their weather is so much like this. Hence, I am wearing fur because in the northern European countries, fur is a must, just like the Eskimos. Their outfits are so amazing and they keep them warm. The animal skin and the fur and the layers. I was reading about the Eskimos this week, and their leather parkas, they invented the parka. They go all the way down below the knees and keep those different native tribes warm through the winter. Amazing how they have survived. It is so cold, and for much of the winter, it is almost dark all day long, and they have to live in their igloos, and they have a way of surviving that is really, truly inspirational. And I have a beautiful piece on the tea table today, which is so appropriate. And this is the Russian Samovar that has been in the homes of the Russians for centuries. And it was one of the main ways they kept warm. And as I studied the history of the tea of Russia, it is most fascinating. The peasants had a form of tea, herbal plants, before the great, wonderful tea came in from China in the 16 and 1700s and came to the Tsar. But the peasants had this invention, and what this was is a samovar, and this is full of water, and then the pot holds a very strong tea, so strong that you would just put a little bit, and this would be a typical cup that would come with the samovar. And it has brass with a little ceramic cup, and it would go here to the water and turn the water on and have mostly hot water, and then they would have just a little splash of the very dark, almost like a concentrated tea. And they would keep this is before electricity, they would keep this going all day long, because under here they would have a piece of charcoal, or they would burn pine cones or wood. And so whenever anyone came into the home, they would be offered a cup of tea. And it was a survival, truly. I am playing Tchaikovsky's famous violin concerto for us today. And it has such varied beauty in it. And Tchaikovsky was probably the greatest Russian composer. And he was living in the late 1800s. And he influenced Rachmaninoff and other Russian composers. And we all love Tchaikovsky. He left an incredible collection of music given to the whole world. But anyway, on this little, I have this in my dining room. This is very old, and it, of course, I would never use it now because I wouldn't really know how to functionally, I wouldn't know if I trusted the metal inside to use for tea, but I like the look. And what I always have sitting in the cups is these famous Russian eggs. The Russians are famous for their art, and This is a painted church from probably way, way out in the country, old church. And it reminds us of the stave church in Norway. And you know, these northern countries did influence one another. And the Vikings went to all of these places. So Russia borders on the Baltic Sea in the north. And those Vikings would have come from Finland and Norway and Sweden and Denmark on their boats. And boat travel was the main thing. And they collected a lot of ideas. And now the other one is an icon. And of course, Russia is an Eastern Orthodox church. They have a cross on the back, an Eastern Orthodox cross, which has in the center, if you see, it distinguishes it from other crosses. And then we have, of course, the Madonna, Mary, and baby Jesus. And the Russian Orthodox, they use these icons not as, they don't worship them. I've talked to Russian Orthodox, but they use them as assistants to pray, and they thinking about God. And it's like we would have pictures in our home that inspire us. So it's a real artistic heritage and goes way back. Now I am wearing strings and strings of pearls today, and I'll tell you why. I'm wearing them in tribute to the last Tsarina. And the Tsar and the Tsarina, you know, when the Russian Revolution happened in 1917, they were deposed, and then with their beautiful family, they eventually died. But she would wear all these, if you see pictures, now I'm wearing black today because it goes with my fur, but generally you see her and her daughters in white, and they have all these pearls. And of course, their pearls would have been real. And real pearls, so valuable and very precious. But you know, a pearl is a rather easy thing to imitate. And so we have a lot of pearl jewelry in our world that is faux, or what we would call reproduction, imitation, and they're beautiful. And we don't have to worry about anyone taking them, right? Right. There are advantages of not having the real thing. There really are. Well, if you haven't gotten your tea yet, please get your tea, and I will be waiting for you. Well, before we pour out, I want to show you what else I have. I have a little collection of Russian nesting dolls. Now, this is one that doesn't have anything inside of it, but I actually think he goes inside. I don't know for sure, but he might go inside. I have gotten a little confused. I have a few nesting dolls, and this is what they are. You open them up, and then there's this one, and then you open that, and there should be another one inside. But I am going to tell you what happened at Christmas. I had little grandchildren here, all three and under the age of 3, and someone brought out these nesting dolls, and these little toddlers were all playing with them. Well, what could I do? So much going on. It's Christmas. They were all taken apart, and I have found them in the most unusual places. I'm still searching. So I think there's something more that goes in this, but I will show you. This one is very, very, very special here. You know, Winston Churchill, he once said a famous saying when he was talking about Russia. He said, Russia is a mystery covered in an enigma, surrounded by a puzzle. Russia, the great Russia, is such a different place because it is not really just a country, it's a world. Did you know there are 11 time zones in Russia? Now, this is beautiful. I love these bold colors. It reminds me of Scandinavian colors because they always paint. I think when you have a kind of a dreary winter climate, you want these bold colors. Let's see if I can get this open. There, I got it open. Okay, we're gonna put her here. Now, the next one is this. And we're gonna open her. Oh, now there's another one. Gonna open her. Oh, and there's another one. However, she is missing her second half. So I am in search now in my house for these lost. I know they're here. Nobody took them out, but when you have little toddlers and so much going on at Christmas and presents being opened and everything happening at once, you can lose track quickly of something this small. Let's see now. Wait. You have to match them up. Now, I found this is one little tiny head that probably is the center of this one. So I'm looking for that other half. Okay. Now, this is the most spectacular one we have. She's awesome. Isn't she beautiful? And she's big. I mean, look at, you can measure my face. This is the biggest one I've ever seen. Whoops. Okay, we'll take that. And all I have in here is half. So I'm looking for that upper half. And so now I'm on an adventure in my own house. But you know, when they climb around on the couch and things, I think they're hiding. I've had my kids help me go under the couch and we got everything we could find. So I'll let you know as we come along our tea talks if I fully find these. Well, now I've chosen for my pot today a beautiful little modern, this is a modern Russian pot. And you can see that it looks, it painted enamel. And I used to go to the Russian store in Leavenworth, and they had the most beautiful samovars, modern, with this kind of pattern, painted like a beautiful, like those Russian scarves. They have such lovely art. Well, I'm going to pour out, so I'll put down my little pot for a minute. And this is I talked last week about St. Petersburg China. This is a piece of St. Petersburg China, cobalt blue and gold. And I just washed this, and that's why it's dripping. But I'm going to pour you a little cup of Russian tea. And I'm fabulous tea today. My son had sent me from a Russian shop in LA when they were living there. I think I told about this on Tea Talk once, but they sent me so much tea. I was recovering from being not feeling so well, and they wanted to cheer me up. And so they sent me tea, and this was part of it that I saved. And it's Impra Royal Elixir Tea. And it is so, the tea they sent is so fabulous. This tea, I'm going to show you. It's in It's in this. It's loose leaf. Oh my goodness, it has a scent that is so pure and so good. And I'm going to start using this again. I went to get this tin to show you. Also, they sent me a box, and I can't find it. I know I have it somewhere, that had the Tsar and Tsarina, and it was Russian tea with a flavor of berry. Delicious tea. Because the peasants in Russia, like I said, they would make their own herbal teas from what they could grow. And then, well, what happened, I'll back up a little bit. Turkey was known so much for coffee. But when the Japanese emperor visited Turkey, he brought tea from China. And the tea was so delicious that the Arabic people from there started drinking a lot of tea. And then they started realizing that they could grow tea also because of their climate. Well, then the Tsar was sent tea in the 1700s, well, actually in the 16s, and at first they didn't like it, but then they started liking it, and then they had green tea and white tea and red tea and orange tea. They had all these different teas coming, and the royal house of Russia just fell in love with tea, and every home that could afford it had a samovar. And when you read Leo Tolstoy's books, or Dostoevsky, or Pushkin, or any of the Russian authors, tea is the center of their social life. They have conversations around tea, almost like the Asian tea ceremony. It is very social. And in that cold climate, and people in those days were on foot. They didn't have cars. The roads wouldn't have even been good for cars. People were on foot, or if they had money, they had a horse or a mule, but most of them were on foot, and so they went to their neighbor's cottage and would have tea. There weren't restaurants or hotels, but their social time was circling around tea. Well, now the other cup I want to show you, this is my very special cup. And my husband gave me the very first cup I had like this. And this is the kind of the most famous St. Petersburg china. It's called the net, and it's very nice. And then as we went along, I found a few cups once at a closeout sale. A lot of these little import shops were closing, and then I found one at a thrift shop, and I've collected a few. I only have a few though. They're very expensive. Okay, here is this wonderful Russian tea. Oh my. I can just see Tolstoy. He was an aristocrat. He was a count, and his father, the aristocrats would have big farms, and they had many servants, and he had a tutor because his mother died, but his tutor, she was French, and her name was Tonette, and she was beloved of the family. She filled the place that a mother would fill with love, and Leo Tolstoy grew up, well, by his writings, with a beautiful heart. This is a nice cup. My husband and I often have coffee in these cups. These are nice. They're just very generous cups. The interesting thing about the Russian china is they have a small indent on where you would put the cup, but it doesn't fit as tight as like a British china indentation. And I think I learned why today. Because the water was so hot in the samovar that they couldn't immediately drink, because many of them didn't put any milk in their tea. They would prefer sugar. And so they would pour a little tea in their saucer, and then they would drink it from the saucer so they wouldn't burn themselves. And that's why I think the saucer is nice and rounded. I think for that reason. It's very interesting. Every country has their contribution to the tea table, don't they? Indeed. Well, and the pearls, I'm also thinking in January, when you read any of Tolstoy's books, Anna Karenina, War and Peace, or my favorite Marie Ivanov autobiography, in January, that was the season for the balls. Now we know why. Nothing could go on in January. The ground is frozen. No one can really be working. It's inside work at that point, and the days were so short. They needed to do something to bring joy, and so that's why they had the ball season in January. And those balls, if you read about them, they didn't even start until evening. They would eat at midnight, sometimes not go home till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And for the aristocratic people of Russia, they had, of course, many servants, and they weren't having to go to work. And much of this is depicted in, like I said, Leo Tolstoy's writings. And Russia has 11 time zones, as I said. 11 time zones. They go all the way. You can actually see China from Siberia, it is said. You can see in a distant, on a clear day, you can see China. And then on the west side, they're, of course, right against Ukraine, but against Estonia and the Baltic Sea. And then down in the south, the Crimea, they're right against Turkey. And so they had all of these people groups coming in and influencing their culture. And so they took the best from everyone. And I was thinking, America is like that in the food. We have pizza and all the wonderful Italian food. We have teriyaki and Chinese food and all the wonderful Asian food. We have pho from, I think pho is from Vietnam. And then you have the Thai food. And then, of course, you have the Mexican food that is so popular with everyone. Oh, all of these foods are, but you know, they've increased as people come in. They bring with them, when the Irish immigrants came in, they brought their beef stew with them and taught everyone how to make beef stew. When the Norwegians came, they brought those Norwegian cookies and lefse and open-faced sandwiches. And the Dutch brought the good cheeses. And each group brings something to the table. And food is where it is at, but tea also. And when that Silk Road, you know, Marco Polo went up the Silk Road, and I believe it was, they said the Khan, one of the Khans brought the tea to the Tsar first and introduced it. So that's the story behind the story. Well, I love these pearls. You know, they're fun. Pearls are not worn as much now as they were in the olden days, but it used to be a pearl necklace was the classic thing to wear. And aristocratic ladies might have one or two good pearl necklaces that were real and completely priceless. And that was what they wore. So I was thinking, I need a little purse that is really cute. And this little purse, what it has is, on it, it has pictures of the masked ball going. And so it has pictures. I'll show you close up. This is a handmade velvet. The people going to the ball. And it looks just like kind of a Russian ball. Or even, you know, in Little Women, you know, they had the party, and it was in the winter when they had the party across the street. And in Pride and Prejudice, you have the beautiful party, and in Sense and Sensibility, and in Jane Austen, because the winter can get so hard and people needed something to get dressed for, something to plan for, something. Planning and preparing and getting ready is almost as good as going, isn't it? And then they would go and see their friends and pick up on what was the latest going on. This, I'll show you the velvet. This has velvet trim, and it's kind of a green, black velvet. Really beautiful. Isn't that lovely? Somebody created this. It's handmade. It's very, very special. Well, I think going, oh, I forgot the treat. Okay, I seem to forget the treat, but the treat is the last of Christmas. And this is actually German, but it's very similar to what they have all over Europe. It's stollen bread, S-T-O-L-L-E-N, has marzipan in the middle, and raisins and nuts, and it's a very popular treat. And when I was reading about the tea that they would have, well, let me show you where the marzipan is. The marzipan is right, okay, I'll see if I can pull out a piece. It's right in the middle. See the yellow? That's the marzipan. And this is imported from Germany, but these countries share with each other. And now, especially with all the travel, but this would have been a very typical treat, something like this, because the Russians loved the sweet to go with the tea. And so they would, whatever they had in their home or could make, they would prepare, spread, and share. Isn't that nice? Put that back there. Well, it's interesting. I love learning about other people groups and other places. And we know that Russia has gone through very hard times and sad times, but the actual beautiful Russian people have contributed so much. The best ballet in the world is the Bolshoi ballet in Russia. The best violinists, the best pianists, the chess people, they're so gifted. And I have known many singers, beautiful singers. Oh my. There is a note that Rachmaninoff wrote in his Vespers that can only be hit by a Russian bass. They have to be trained from childhood to sing that low. And there's a note there. I will play the Vespers for you sometime on the tea table, but you can look it up. Rachmaninoff Vespers. What we did several times was we had tea and lit candles and listened to the Vespers. What it is Rachmaninoff, the great composer, went throughout Russia to all of the ancient churches and in the little villages and towns and collected the most ancient liturgical Christian church music he could find, and he combined it all in a collection called Vespers. Vespers is the evening office of the church, and that means the prayer time. The Eastern Orthodox, I have a friend very close friend, and her brother-in-law is a Russian Orthodox priest in California, in Bakersfield. And do you know that they have church every day at 6 o'clock? They have a service. And it's short, but I know that the great homes of the aristocratic Russian people, or anyone that could afford it, they would all build a chapel in their home on their property. And Solzhenitsyn did this. When he came from Russia in the 70s to America, and he came to Vermont, and he built a house, he built a chapel, and he had a priest that would come every day, and they would have their vespers or prayer. And so that is the service that, the services that Rachmaninoff went to collect, these obscure, beautiful pieces that had been written and perhaps were not sung in the cities. Well, if you read Marie Ivanov's, Marie Ivanov, well, her autobiography, they had a chapel and they had a priest. And then you also read Maria von Trapp. Now, she was from Austria. She was Catholic. When they built their home, they had a chapel built, and they had their own priest also. And the priest, if you read her autobiography called Maria, he is the one who really taught them to sing harmonies. They were folk singers, but they wanted to do more advanced music. And so their priest was a trained musician and taught them how to sing motets and really advanced harmonic music. So having a chapel in the home is actually a wonderful thing. And you will see in the Russian books, and I have a book upstairs that a woman, after she had left Russia and escaped to the West, she would probably be passed now, because she had painted, a beautiful artist, and she had painted all these pictures of what their life was like, you know, in the sleigh and in the family. And she was from a home that had a chapel in it, and she has the priest coming in. And I will bring that book to the tea table. But it is interesting because even their calendar was operating from the Christian liturgical church year. And in the Middle Ages, that's the way it was. And the Eastern Orthodox continued to do that, and was a very Christian culture. And I know that in Marie Ivanov's book, this is a true story, this is not a novel, it's her autobiography. She's a young girl. This is like 1910, before the revolution happened. And Leo Tolstoy was a friend of her grandfather's, and he came to their home on New Year's Eve, and he said, could we read the scriptures together? He wanted to read the Gospels together with Marie Ivanov's grandfather. But they were on their way to church at that night, to go to church on New Year's Eve. So he greeted him and they had tea, but he didn't stay. But that was the common way that people lived. Isn't that interesting? And their life revolved around those really Christian holidays, which really our life revolves around too. Christmas, the birth of Christ. We go to Epiphany, Three Kings. And this next week, on the 2nd of February, and we'll talk about it next week on the tea table, is Candlemas Day. And that is celebrated in the Eastern Church. And that's why I was thinking so much about the Russians, because they still celebrate very much Candlemas Day, which is the 40th day after Easter, when Mary would be purified and come to the temple and bring the baby Jesus. And so Candlemas Day, they will keep the Christmas tree, but take all the colorful ornaments off and have white turtle doves signifying the offering and white lights and white crosses. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that beautiful? I love all celebrations that reflect goodness and grace and love and God's light again. There's the light. Candle Mass. It means the Mass of the candles. The candles bring in the light in the darkness. February 2nd. Beautiful day. And one of my dearest friends who has passed on now, her birthday was Candlemas. And her name was Dawn, D-A-W-N, Carolyn. And do you know what her name meant? Dawn means light, and Carolyn means song. And she wrote beautiful writings, and she entitled her book, her autobiography, Light Song. Isn't that beautiful? After her two names. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed your cup of tea. I love cobalt blue and gold. That is your cup. And they all have the little stamp, St. Petersburg. So we want to pray for the whole world. We want to pray for peace in 2024. And we want to pray that God will bless all the countries of the world and all the people of the world. So that is my tribute to the historical part of Russia that we can remember. And the beautiful Tsar and Tsarina. If you read about their lives, they were truly Christian people, and they had true love. They loved each other so much. Their love letters and their family and the way they treated one another. A real testimony of God's beauty and grace. So thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Push the notification bell, and I will be waiting for you.